Utah Realtors, please give a warm virtual welcome to your 2021 UAR President, Caro Norton.
Good morning. Welcome to the special broker town hall presented jointly by the Salt Lake Board of Realtors and Utah Association of Realtors. I'm Caro Norton, your 2021 UAR President. Before we get started with today's content, I have a couple of announcements. Please remember to sign up for the UAR convention, which will be held August 10th and 11th in Hawaii at the Maui Sheraton. You will find the details about the schedule, hotel, and registration at utahrealtors.com. Just look for the icon at the top of the page with the picture of Maui. We will have the content about how to navigate this low inventory market, as well as great networking opportunities. Make sure to mark your calendars and go to our website to learn more. I also want to thank our sponsor of today's event, utahrealestate.com. We are so grateful to have them for their support in making today's panel possible. Before we introduce our panelists, we have a few government affairs updates. We'll start with George Richards, past president of the UAR, who serves on the National Broker Engagement Council. Then we'll hear from Alyssa Daly, UAR's campaign services coordinator, who will give us an update on municipal elections. And then we'll hear from UAR's Government Affairs Director, Kate Klunt, who will give a legislative update.
Thank you, President. This is George Richards. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. They've asked me to just talk about a few things that are NAR is doing for our industry and for us as brokers that I think is important that we know. I want you to know that your RPAC dollars are being well spent. This is a very busy year and we have a lot of things going. Just a heads up, I noticed that NAR is going to be sending out to all the brokers a survey asking your opinion about the infrastructure plan that the current administration is proposing. They would like feedback from all the brokers in the country as to what they feel about that plan. Second thing that I think might be important that you are aware of, and I know a lot of you may not be, is the DOJ had a suit going with the National Association of Realtors. I won't get into the details of the suit, but it had to do with our MLS system, how it works, and commissions and access to listings, et cetera. The NAR has proposed a settlement. We're not admitting any wrongdoing, but has proposed a settlement to that suit. Just briefly, just a couple of things that you might want to be aware of. The amount of compensation offered to buyers agents for each ML listing now will be made publicly available to our buyers, and the public will be able to search our MLS data so that they can see what that offer of compensation is to a buyer's agent. No longer will agents be able to advertise that their services are for free to their buyers. And I believe there'll probably be some kind of a form that will have to be signed by the buyers acknowledging that they know what compensation is being paid to the buyer's agent. The other thing that might be interesting is the DOJ does not like that agents might be searching for listings to show their buyers based on BAC or how much compensation that they are being paid. They would like buyers to be exposed to all properties that fit their criteria. So in all probability, BAC will no longer be a part of the published MLS data, and we'll have to probably deal with that in a different way. I think we have a new addendum now in the Salt Lake Board, or maybe it's UAR, that shows what the compensation will be to a buyer's agent. And the other thing that they're requiring is our key box access. They want all brokers to be able to have access to our listings, whether they're members of the MLS or not. That's going to be a little bit cumbersome. Chris Kyler sent a very good response on this issue back to the attorney for NAR about seller liability and our liability. But this is part of what the NAR is suggesting as a settlement with the DOJ. I haven't got more details on how that's going to work, but as a broker, I just thought you might want to all be heads up on that. And that will be voted on by the board of directors in this settlement in the May meetings coming up. So it'll be interesting to see if that gets approved. Second of all, NAR is working hard to stress support for independent contractor status. The current administration has been talking a little bit about possibly doing away with independent contractor status, or at least that we have to comply with the ABC test. And I won't go through what A and B and C is. We've always felt that we have complied with that. But we are certainly lobbying and talking to our legislators that independent contractor status is pretty vital for the real estate industry. We've operated under that scenario for a long time, most of us, and it's worked very well. And I don't see how doing away with that would benefit the public and our clients. So another pretty big issue that our National Association is working in our benefit for, and I appreciate all the efforts again that they're doing in that. And you might want to keep your eyes open for that situation as it happens this coming year. And lastly, you probably saw that they extended the moratorium on evictions till June 30th, 2021. That does affect not just commercial real estate, residential real estate. There are certainly a lot of homes that are leased to different tenants, and there's certain rules that apply to that, but it certainly has had an impact on the rental market, and we need to be aware of that as brokers and agents, because I always say be careful and don't give legal advice unless you're an attorney, and brokers should not be giving legal advice. And sometimes in that arena, this eviction thing, I've seen brokers and agents tell clients things that I don't think they should be saying that, because they're not attorneys and they shouldn't give legal advice. So in summary, there's a lot of issues that can and will affect our industry. NAR is working hard for us, as they always do. I appreciate all the efforts that they're making. I hope all you brokers do. Lots of change could possibly be happening. And so hopefully through our lobbying efforts and all the things that we do, we'll be able to succeed in helping our industry proceed as it always has. And I feel like as a broker of this, my 48th year, we've always put the client first and tried to look out for their interests and try to do what's best for them. And I see agents and brokers every day go to extreme lengths to get their buyers and sellers properties sold and the buyers into the properties. And in this current market with the low inventory, it's amazing how many agents are making multiple offers for these buyers, and sometimes 6, 7, and 8 offers before they can find a home for them to be able to purchase. So I respect that effort. I think we're a great industry and we do a great job for our clients. So I think that's all I've got to say right now, President. So thank you for having me begin this broker town hall.
Thank you.
Hello. Thanks, Madam President, for letting me take a moment to talk about local elections with everyone today. I'm very excited to let you guys know what we've got planned for our local elections efforts. So like George said, the housing market is just crazy right now. You guys know that better than anyone. I feel like every realtor I run into lately is just totally exhausted, and you guys are working so hard. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our realtor family in municipal elections this year. Now, they're not as glamorous as, say, a presidential election cycle. There's not a lot of national media coverage, hopefully, or anything like that. But there's still some of the most important elections that the UAR participates in because of how much they impact your business on the day-to-day in the communities that you work in with clients that you represent. So we've got a few different things that we're doing. First of all, I just want to make everyone aware of a few important dates. If you have a member that is planning on running for a local election, or if that you have an agent that is thinking about maybe looking for a position on the planning commission in their community, we've got some great resources coming up. So first of all, candidate filing is the first week of June. If you're planning on running for a municipal office, you can file with your county office or at your local city building the 1st through the 7th of June. Now, if you're thinking you want to maybe run for office, but you're a little unsure, I would encourage you, go and file. And if you decide, oh, this isn't for me this year, You can always remove your filing information so that your name doesn't appear on the ballot. But if you're thinking about it, I say go ahead, file, try it on for size, see how it feels, come and talk to me, and we'll get you taken care of. So that's first, June 1st through the 7th. That's when candidate filing happens if you've got anybody that has expressed interest in running for a local office. And then for our realtor-friendly candidates, for members that are interested in running for a local office in the future, we have a candidate training that we do with our National Association. We've got a great curriculum that the National Association has shared with us for that. We're going to do that June 15th. So save the date, June 15th, and we will make sure that we get that information out to your local board if you'd like to attend. Even if you're not planning on running this year, maybe you want to run for something in a future year. It's a great way to just see what it takes to run for local office. So plan for that June 15th, please save the date. And then last but not least, we have a program through NAR. If you have a realtor member running, or if you're planning on running for office yourself, that allows us to get NAR funds to help with campaign expenses like direct mailers, digital ads, all of those big things that are the most expensive aspects of a local campaign. So that program is awesome. Contact your local board if you're planning on running for office, and they will put you in touch with me about that program. I'll write the grant for your local board. We'll secure those funds and make sure that you're taken care of with some digital ads or direct mail, whatever's going to work best for your campaign plan. So we've got a few awesome things that we're going to be doing this year. We are conducting some polling. We've got the NAR team writing a poll for us right now that we're going to field next month on affordable housing and development issues, which we will make available to the local boards so they can share that information with realtor-friendly candidates. So lots going on. Please feel free to reach out to me if you plan on running for office or if you're helping on a campaign and would like us to be involved with the campaign you're on. That's all I've got, Madam President. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Madam President, for giving us a couple minutes today to talk about just our general political update from NAR, from our municipal, and from the state. So I just talk about the state for just a little bit, and I'll be very brief. But if you have any questions at all, please email me or call the office, and they can connect you to me as well. But we just wrapped up our legislative session, and it was very odd because a lot of it was virtual, which had some pros and some cons. A lot more people were able to participate because they didn't have to drive all the way to Salt Lake to testify in hearings. And we had some amazing members give testimony about affordable housing bills and tax bills and all sorts of legislation that would impact our association. But it was kind of weird to text legislators instead of meet them in the hallway and talk about our issues and to have so many Zoom calls. But so the largest issue that we worked on was the affordable housing ADU bill. That's the interior accessory dwelling unit bill, HB 82. It made it possible for you to have an interior accessory dwelling unit without so many of the regulations and stipulations from the cities if you already had an ADU ordinance in your city. And there's a lot that we could go into about this. There are some parking requirements and some different zoning requirements based on what type of city you live in, whether or not it's a college city and whatnot. But overall, we consider this a huge win for affordable housing. ADUs rent for about 60% of market value. And they enable young couples to be able to rent their basement and to save for a home or to help pay their mortgage. They're just such an interesting and affordable way to combat the affordable housing process. It doesn't necessarily involve the time constraints of a new development or new infrastructure. So we're really excited about that. There were a number of other affordable housing bills that were able to put more money toward the preservation of affordable housing, also to some stopgap funding. And then we have a special session coming up, and there will be another affordable housing bill during that special session that we needed to work some kinks out of over these last few weeks. So it doesn't stop because the affordable housing problem isn't going to stop. And we're looking forward to all of the issues that we can work on this interim. That's really all I have. But if you have any questions about what went on this legislative session, or if you would like to be more involved by tuning in to our legislative committee or by coming to our legislative preview, please just give me an email or a phone call and they can connect you to my office. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And thank you, George, Alyssa, and Kate for those great political updates. I'd like to take a second. Looks like Matt was able to join us here. Matt he's the 2021 president of the Salt Lake Board. Like to turn the time over to say a welcome and a few words.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Madam President. I wanted to announce that the Salt Lake Board has the American Dream Grant going on. We've added more grants this year than we've had in the past years, as this is a new thing we're doing. But we have until this Friday to apply for the first-time home buyer American Dream Grant, which is $5,000 to go towards down payment or closing costs. And again, you need to apply by April 23rd at the Salt Lake Board slrealtors.com, and it's for all first-time home buyers. There will be upcoming grants here for school district employees that you can apply for in May and June. It starts in May. And then also in July, August, there'll be first-time home buyers. And then in September, there'll be for first responders, military, and veterans. So I encourage all realtors to take advantage of getting first-time home buyers. Qualifications are about 89,000 for, and up to 101 for a family. So if you're a family of 2, it's 89, and then other qualifications, which you will see those and be able to apply for it on the Salt Lake Board website. And then also last thing is the Salt Lake Board's membership dues giveaway for the fiscal year is for 2021 to 2022 is open. So you can, when you're paying your dues and you do contribute to RPAC, you can enter to win free dues, as well as they're doing a new incentive for, it's a brand new Ford Bronco 3-year lease. So every $15 gives you an opportunity, an entry to win a 3-year lease. And if you do more entries, obviously gives you the more opportunities to win. And the dues will begin on August 1st. So look forward to contributing to RPAC. And yeah, we appreciate everybody's contribution and membership to the Salt Lake Board. So thanks for everybody.
Thank you, Matt. We do have I'm so excited to introduce you to everybody. We have a wonderful panel of appraisers who have joined us today. We'll hear from Brandon Witt, who is the Vice President of Appraisal Services for Gateway First Bank. He manages the appraisal department for Gateway and leads a 20-member team responsible for ordering and reviewing approximately 2,500 appraisals a month. Brandon makes sure Gateway is compliant in meeting the GSE's and CFPB's appraisal requirements. Brandon also holds an Oklahoma Certified Residential Real Estate Appraiser license. Our second speaker will be Jared Priestler, who is an independent fee appraiser, as well as the Chief Appraiser and Director of Product Development for Data Master, a company that specializes in appraisal software. He teaches as a National Certified Instructor for Appraisal Institute and is a AQB Certified UPAP instructor. Jared is the current president of the Utah chapter of Appraisal Institute, and he served as a board trustee and vice president of the Utah Association of Appraisers since 2010. Our third panelist is Craig Morley, who is a certified general appraiser licensed in Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. He served on the Utah Appraiser Licensing and Appraisal Board for 8 years, including 4 years as chair. He serves on the NAR Real Property Valuation Committee and serves on the Appraisal Foundation's Appraisal Standards Board. Our fourth speaker is Jeff Morley, who is a certified general appraiser in Utah and Nevada. He holds a MAI and SRA designations from the Appraisal Institute. He has been appraising since 2002 and currently oversees a national team of appraisers and trainees. Jeff currently serves as chairman of the Utah Appraiser Licensing and Appraisal Board. Our final panelist is Ashley Wolf-Lewis. Hopefully I said that right. She is a certified residential appraiser and owner of Element Appraisal. She is also a real estate agent with Remax Associates. She is currently the co-chair for the Board of Governors for National Association of Appraisers and is the former president of the Utah Coalition of Appraisal Professionals. Man, these are busy people. So thank you to each of you for taking time out of your schedules to be with us today. Before we hear from our speakers, Deanna Devi, UAR's Director of Operations, will quickly tell us how we'll be managing questions for the appraisers.
All right. Well, I know that all of you are super excited to hear from our appraisers. And what we're going to do is we're going to have them speak for about 15 minutes apiece. We're going to hear from all of them. And then at that point, we'll be answering questions. I know that's going to be a very popular part of this panel. But if you have any questions while they're speaking, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring the Q&A. And then I will ask as many questions as I can to the appraisers. We'll try and get to as many as we can. And then I'm going to send you out their contact information when this is over in case we don't get to all of the questions. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Brandon. Then we'll hear from Jared, then Craig, then Jeff, then Ashley. So Brandon, take it away for us.
All right, thank you very much. A little bit about my background. So about 19 years ago, I got into the appraisal business and had my own appraisal company and did that for many years before coming to work for Gateway. And I came to work for Gateway in 2009. So I've been here about 12 years. And with that, we've grown to now where we have about 20 people. About half my team orders the appraisals and about half my team reviews the appraisals. So we look at them in about, I think we're in 41 or 42 states. So we kind of look at them all across the country. And certainly right now, it's a very, very interesting time. A lot of areas are experiencing what you all are experiencing in Utah, where low inventory and values going up a lot and multiple offers. So we're dealing with it everywhere, and it's created, a lot of appeals, as you can imagine, and different things. So today I'm just going to go over a few things from a bank or mortgage company's perspective, and really dealing with banks or mortgage companies that are selling their loans to the secondary market. So going through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA. One thing that I would like to point out is that appraisers are not looking to come in low or trying to kill deals. Most are just trying to do an honest job, adhere to USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And it's recognized as the ethical and performance standards for the appraisal profession in the US. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have exclusionary lists, and we check them before adding appraisers. So, and then FHA has a roster which appraisers can be kicked off of as well. So if an appraiser gets put on one of the GSE's exclusionary or don't use lists, it can make it very hard for them to do business. So, they're obviously trying to avoid that, do an honest job. And, they realize whenever they come in low, they're going to get a lot of calls and everything. So they're not looking to create trouble. They're just looking to try to do an honest job and watch out for the lender and the buyer as well. So one of the main things that lenders that we are trying to do as well is avoid repurchases. So, in my job, I deal with and meet with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac regularly. And so they go through things and they show us, things that different things that are coming out and different things to look for in appraisals and everything. So we have to, meet and adhere to their guidelines. And so all the lenders across the country are just trying to do that, trying to avoid repurchases and stay compliant with the rules that they put out. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Fannie Mae's collateral underwriter, or what we call CU, which has really been the biggest game changer in reviewing appraisals. Also, Freddie Mac has their own version of it. It's called Loan Collateral Advisor, or LCA. They both rate appraisals on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest risk and 5 being the highest risk. They've indicated to us that anything that scores a 4 or above is considered high risk and has a greater likelihood for them to look at or audit, which could lead to a repurchase request. It does not mean we can't loan on these deals, that score high, it just often means that we have to do extra due diligence with them, that we have to maybe go back to the appraiser and have them explain why they're not using some comps that are close by, or why they've made an adjustment that looks different than what their model or their peers are making, and it gives us that kind of data. So, so with that, I'm going to share my screen and go through a few things as well. All right. Well, Collateral Underwriter is it offers a powerful collateral risk management for lenders. Collateral Underwriter is a web-based application that provides at no charge to help lenders manage collateral risk as part of their underwriting and quality control process. The application uses appraisal data and advanced analytics to help identify and research appraisals with overvaluation, appraisal quality, or property eligibility, policy, and compliance risks. All right, CU performs a comprehensive analysis of 1004 and 1073 appraisals, which are submitted to the UCDP and provide real-time feedback with scores, risk flags, and messages. CU's data-rich applications designed for lenders to investigate and evaluate risk factors reflected in the CU risk score. Leveraging a database of over 50 million appraisals, CU offers a wealth of market data and advanced analytics to help lenders assess and manage their appraisal portfolios, including alternative comparable sales, market level metrics, zip code and MSA level market trends, MLS and public records, peer adjustment data, aerial imagery, and construction records. So they told us that basically every sale that happened goes through CU on an average of 4 times. So they really have just about every sale. So most sales that happen are coming through the appraisals, and so they have access and the data to it. So, all right, this is a screenshot of what we see whenever we log on. So basically, it gives us a map, and it'll show where the subject is, and then where in the blue, that's the comparables that the appraisers used. And then in the orange, it shows other comparables that would be available. And so it also gives us, as you can see up there, it'll tell us like this one scored a 4.3, so not great. And it'll tell us there's a heightened risk of appraisal quality issues, give us some adjustment messages that show that maybe the adjustments that the appraiser used were not similar to his peers or similar to what their model shows. And then it'll also show, say some different thing, like there's a data discrepancy message and so forth. So not all of them have to be addressed, but sometimes some of them do. And whenever we get a 4.2, that means we're going to go in and dig into it a little bit more and kind of try to find out a little bit more about it. Okay. So this is kind of the map that to zoom in a little bit more so you can see the subject here. And so, it might be on this that we would look and look at these, say comp 1 and 2, and we can look up and we can pull up and see interior pictures of it, exterior ones, and be like, you know what, it looks like one of these should be used. We need to get the appraiser to explain why they aren't. So that the more detailed an appraiser can be on things, the more it helps us out, because there's oftentimes reasons. It may be that the house hasn't been as updated as ours, or our lot is, a lot different size, or there could be reasons that the appraiser could explain that make sense, but oftentimes, we just need them to explain that. Okay, so this is a list that shows a lot of the data. So on this one, there were a little over 20, I think 22 comparables that were available. And it will give us, the age, the lot size, the GLA of them, because sometimes we might be able to look at that and see, that one's too much larger, smaller. That would be the reason they didn't use it. Ours is in C4 condition, whereas another one might be in C3, or that might be the reason that they didn't use it. And so it gives us all this data here. It'll show what they sell for, and then it also will give us their model adjustments. So their model will come up with adjustments on that as well. And let's see. All right, and so on this shows that this will show where the adjustments are made. And so oftentimes we'll look at this and be able to tell, one of the reasons it's scoring high is the appraiser's adjustments are a lot different. So an example of that might be like on comp 1 here, the appraiser for our lot size being 10,000 square foot versus comp 1's being 6,500 square foot, our appraiser only made a $400 adjustment, whereas their model showed that 6,600 was warranted. So, so with that, we might go back to the appraiser and have them explain it. One of the biggest things we see with side adjustments is appraisers not making any adjustment for it, and then their data is showing that a large one is warranted. So we're going to need to have the appraiser explain why no side adjustment. And there can be absolute reasoning and explanations. A lot of times, it could be that the side adjustment is based on value, not size, and that you have one that's in a more desirable area, maybe one that has a better view or something, so it would be more. So there can be reasons why, and as long as the appraiser explains it, then that will make sense. Another thing, it'll even show where maybe date of sale adjustment, so a time adjustment will be warranted. I know in Utah that a lot of times right now time adjustments are warranted. That the market's really been going up. So and realizing that it need to go both ways on the time adjustments. When I first got into this in 2009, when we were looking at stuff that was on the East or West Coast, all the appraisers were making downward time adjustments for how the market was going down. And so those appraisers a lot of times learn how to make time adjustments and make them. Unfortunately, in a lot of areas that we're in, like I'm here in Oklahoma, most of the appraisers don't make time adjustments. And so it becomes a problem whenever our market's changing very much. So that's one thing that, that we look at as well. Another thing you might look on here is that the appraiser, like on this one's making an adjustment, even though we're C3 and they're C3, this appraiser is making a $5,000 adjustment, which is fine as long as he or she explains it within the report. Then that's not a problem. But and CU's not perfect, and neither is Loan Collateral Advisor. It can't recognize a difference between conditions and things. So we realize that and we learn it. So there, as long as it's explained in there, then that's the reason, and everything can be fine with it. It breaks down a lot of different adjustments, just like, it'll show sometimes, the different adjustments on basements, bathrooms. There are a couple of weaknesses with it. It can't at this time recognize swimming pools or outbuildings like a barn or a shop or something. I have been told that in the future that is coming, so that will help. So, but it's something as reviewers, we've done it enough that we realize that, hey, this isn't, this is the reason it's scoring high, because ours has a pool and it can't recognize it or something to that effect. So we do have that. I like to give examples of how much that they watch lenders and appraisers. When CU had not been out very long, several of the appraisers that developed CU for Fannie Mae, they met my appraisal team and I in Dallas to help train us on CU. And they put up slides to show how much we were using CU. And they broke them down by risk score, like, everything from 1 to 2, everything from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then so forth. And it worried me because I was afraid, I didn't know they were looking that detail, but luckily they said we were looking at the high risk and the amount that they wanted to, but it really let me know how much that they were, watching lenders. And they also put up, a picture, and I'll go back to this one, of one that had ended up in a repurchase, and it was showing how the appraiser had used comps that were all on the other side of a natural barrier, and their data can break it down by census block and show even price per square foot. So they were showing, the appraiser has chosen comps over here where our area shows that it's selling for $100 a square foot, and the comps are in an area that sell for $150 a square foot, and there were comps available over here to be able to use. So that's, they're looking at that kind of stuff, and they'll look at appraisers and stuff too. So that's one of the reasons why appraisers try to stick by following the guidelines that are put out there, just to make sure that they're meeting with making good on that. And then another thing that they put up a picture of an attic and showed that they had caught it, and said that they had caught an appraiser that was using the same attic pick in all of his appraisals by measuring the megapixels that were in that picture inside the report. It kept showing up with the same one, and which I thought was crazy that they were looking in that detail. But one of the things that afterwards I thought about that really seemed crazy is it was on a conventional appraisal, which doesn't even require a attic picture to be in there. But really, it just let me know, hey, they're definitely looking at things in detail. So one of the advantages with CU is on appeals. It gives us that extra data and stuff to be able to look at. And oftentimes when we get an appeal, if it's warranted, we're not going to send an appeal if it's not warranted. But if it looks like we'd be okay if it went up somewhat, maybe the realtors have sent in 5 comps and we look and we're like, yeah, one of those comps looks good. But then we might look on CU and find another comp or 2. And then also we can look at the adjustments and what their model shows and show, hey, you didn't make a time adjustment on here, but it looks like that, that their data is showing one's warranted. So it's been good in that. When it first came out, it really scared a lot of the appraisers. We had some that got out of the business for it. They thought, I don't want, a computer measuring, how I do my work and stuff, but really we've adapted to it, and it hasn't been near as bad. In fact, it's ended up, being a game changer as far as reviewing appraisals. All right, now I am going to talk a little bit about just briefly on the appraisal process. So this is just a real short version of it. So generally the loan officer or their processor will order it, and then our team, we assign it to a local appraiser that's on our panel. At another lender, they might send it to their, to their AMC to be able to do it. And then the appraisal, is sent out, the appraiser schedules it and does the appraisal. And then when they complete it, they send it in. We put it in line to be reviewed. So our appraisal review team gets it and they'll review it and either condition the appraisal if it needs condition, or go ahead and clear it and send it to the borrower. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the appraisal process. Now, mention briefly on as-is appraisals. So we get, I get all the time someone saying, oh, this is conventional. That, I thought that meant that the appraisal could be as is. Well, the reality is that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they both have their safety, soundness, and security measures. So I'm just going to read this briefly from one of their FAQs. It says, Fannie Mae permits an appraisal to be based on the as-is condition of the property as long as any minor conditions such as deferred maintenance do not affect the safety, soundness, or structural integrity of the property, and the appraiser's opinion of value reflects the existence of these conditions. And it goes on to say the appraiser must identify physical deficiencies that could affect the safety, soundness, or structural integrity of the property as part of his or her description of the physical condition of the property. And these may include cracks or settlement in the foundation, water seepage, active roof leaks, curled or cut roof shingles. So really, while they are easier than FHA, they have become very similar in that FHA's become easier and definitely eased up on their requirements. If you've been in the business very long, a long time ago, FHA used to require the house to be just about in perfect condition. They've eased up on that. And while we do, most of our stuff with conventional comes back as is, there's definitely things that affect the safety, soundness, and security that we have to go back and condition for. This would be an example on the foundation. I get sent foundation pictures all the time, and we're going to require a foundation inspection if it's bad like this, and say you could put a pencil or pen inside of the crack. Sometimes it might just be a hairline crack, and if the appraiser hasn't said that that it's required to get one, we're probably not going to require it. Just say it's typical settlement. But if it's bad, then we're going to require it, because Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac would want us to, and that might make us repurchase it if we do not, just like all the other lenders. So that's really what we're looking at. This is an example. We'll get this sent on an as-is appraisal, and unfortunately, we have to make sure that the safety stuff's up to par as well. So on this, we would require like the rails to be put up, and I'm sure it was going to be put up here anyways. They just haven't yet, but sometimes not. So we see situations that all types of different safety issues arise, and we're going to have to make it subject to that. The good news about requiring these to do is us, along with other lenders, have products available to be able to take care of different items. You know, one of the things, if the house is in really poor condition, then, you know, something like that, then we have what's called, you know, Fannie Mae has a home style product available, and FHA has a 203K product available. So there's different things, and we can do, you know, depending on the item, if it's not too major, do an escrow holdback for it. So there's ways that we can handle properties that are in below average condition, which if you're not familiar on an appraisal, there's C5 and C6 condition. And a little caveat, Fannie Mae will loan on C5 where Freddie Mac won't. C5 is basically just below average condition, whereas C6 would be where it would be deemed unlivable, and none of the, you know, none of the GSEs will accept C6 condition, but we can work with C5 a lot of times, and a lot of times with C5 it might just be that there's one or two items, like maybe the roof's bad, and we would just require a roof inspection and maybe fixing, you know, part of the roof or something to that effect, and we could be able to lend on it and everything as well. So with that, I just want to say thank you for letting me speak and giving you all an overview of CU and a couple of things in the appraisal industry. And I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah.
I'll start sharing my screen here. My name is Jared Chrysler. I'm a certified appraiser in Utah. I'm also the chief appraiser for DataMaster. And as I've got a little disclaimer up here, I'll let you read that. This presentation is my own presentation and not the views of DataMaster. This morning, what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is a couple of definitions and items and how they might apply to, or how they do apply to the real estate appraisal practice and real estate transactions. And that would be price, cost, and market value. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the difference of each of those are, as well as I'm going to visit a little bit about the analysis of listing history and the analysis of the purchase contract. I was watching the chats, the Q&A, and there were quite a few of you that had questions about the purchase contracts and listing history and how the appraiser deals with those. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then at the end of my time, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a tip as to what to do if or when the appraiser's opinion of value does not meet the purchase, your purchase price. And so that'll be towards the end of my presentation. I appreciate Brandon kind of going over some of the details on the collateral underwriting side, and as appraisers, you know, understanding what happens once our appraisal gets turned in. The appraisal process is the most regulated part or part of the purchase transaction, part of the loan process. And it's important for appraisers to make sure that they're meeting the scope of work, the guidelines for each of the lenders and their clients. So with that, let's talk first about price. Price is defined as the amount of money expected, required, or given in the payment for something. It's the amount of money needed to persuade someone to do something. And price is also defined by the Appraisal of Real Estate 15th edition, which is the most recent edition, as the amount a particular purchaser agrees to pay and a particular seller agrees to accept under the circumstances surrounding their transaction. And you'll notice here at the very end, it says price is an accomplished fact. It is not an opinion. It is a fact, and that's one of the distinctions. Cost is the amount paid or required in payment for the purchase. It's also the expenditure of something for such as time or labor necessary for the attainment of a goal. The 15th edition of the Appraisal of Real Estate defines cost as the total dollar expenditure for an improvement, meaning or structure. It applies to production, not to exchange. So this is a distinction that appraisers make. Exchange is the price. Appraisers distinguish among or between direct costs or hard costs, indirect or soft costs, and then also the cost of entrepreneurial coordination. And so we look at all of the different aspects and break those costs out. Soft costs, just so that you know, the soft costs might be something like your real estate commissions. Those would be the soft cost. That would be a soft cost. And value, which is what we're mostly focused on, what the appraiser is going to determine is the opinion of value. Value is an amount as of goods and services or money considered to be a fair and suitable equivalent for something else, a fair price or return. It's monetary or material worthy. The fluctuating value of gold or silver would be a good example of that. Worth and usefulness are important to the possessor. It's a utility or merit. The value, for example, the value of an education. The Appraisal of Real Estate 5th edition defines value this way. Value first represents the monetary worth of a property, good, or service to a buyer and seller at a given time. Second, the present worth of future benefits that occur or result from real property ownership. And so I hope that this helps kind of understand the distinction that we make between these three key facts or concepts. For appraisers, the term value can be a little misleading sometimes. Appraisers, we typically refer to a particular type of value, not just the term value alone. We have market value, value in use, investment value, assessed value, auction value. There are many different types of value. And the market value that we're going to talk about today that really is most important for all of us is the definition of market value by the GSEs, which GSE stands for government-sponsored entity. So basically, this is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac's definition of value. And it has 5 key components. I want to share those components with you so that you can kind of understand the problem that the appraiser is solving for. They directly relate to this definition. So first of all, the definition is included in every appraisal. It's in the certification pages, and the appraiser is required to disclose what the definition is, and then to certify that their opinion of value meets that definition of market value. If I was doing an appraisal for something other than a loan or a real estate transaction, I might use a different definition of value. Say I was doing something for the IRS or for a different purpose. But this is the one that matters to us today. So market value is the most probable price in which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The buyers and sellers each acting prudently, knowledgeable, and assuming that price is not affected by undue stimulus. Implicit in this definition is the consummation of a sale as of a specific date and the passing of title from the seller to the buyer under these 5 conditions. So there's 5 components that have to be met in order for that price to be value. The first one is that the buyers and sellers are typically motivated. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these individually after I outline all of them. Second is both parties are well informed and well advised, each acting in what he or she considers their own best interest. Third, a reasonable time is allowed for exposure in the open market. Fourth, payment is made in terms of cash in US dollars or in terms of financial arrangements comparable thereto. And last, the price represents normal consideration for the properties sold unaffected by special or creative financing or sales concessions granted by anyone associated with the sale. So understanding that this is the definition that Fannie Mae expects the appraiser to develop their opinion of value to, hopefully this will help you to understand sometimes why the appraiser has to deduct concessions or why we might have to consider the financing, the type of terms, the motivation between the buyers and the sellers. We can think of it this way, and hopefully this will help understand a little bit as well. Let's say that we have some bubbles here that represent each of these 5 components of the definition of market value. First, we have typically motivated buyers and sellers. So an example of a situation where the buyers and sellers might not be equally motivated. Maybe it's a bank who is taking the property back in an REO scenario. They might not be as motivated or typically motivated as a homeowner trying to sell their property. So in that case, the price that was offered or the consummated purchase price may not represent market value. It could, but it might not because the motivation could be different. Also, we might have a scenario where, say, somebody wants to move next door wants to buy the property next door so that they can move their aging parents next to them so that they can take care of them. They might be willing to pay more than market for that convenience, for having the home next to them available for an aging parent. The next component is being well-informed. Well-informed is where you guys come in to the scenario. As an agent, you do your due diligence in doing a CMA prior to listing the property. If you have the buyers, then you advise them, you help them to see what is going on in the market, and even double check that listing might be correct or might represent what the market is doing currently. You help them in that being well informed. Often when we have the assignment to do, say, a for sale by owner transaction, the sellers may not be well informed of what their property was worth, and they could be asking way more than what the property is worth because they're not informed, or maybe they're under offering. They're offering way less than what the market would bear. The next bubble would be reasonable exposure time. And this is on a property by property basis. So we look at what exposure time is the time before our effective date. Marketing time is what comes after the effective date. And we're required by our standards, by USPAP, to actually identify the exposure time within our report. And so a reasonable exposure time is really synonymous with the current market exposure time. Some properties have longer exposure time than others. Currently, in our market, we're seeing very, very short exposure time, sometimes less than 2 or 3 days. So we look at that exposure time and consider that as part of the market value, the opinion of market value. In terms of US dollars, so I know that there's a trend, and we're not seeing a lot of them yet, but we are seeing Bitcoin transactions where properties are transacting for something other than US dollars. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the GSEs, do not lend on those type of transactions. So we have to convert any of that to US dollars. And then the last one would be no creative financing. And as all of these bubbles meet together, so right in the middle is where market value lies. It's a component that all 5 of them must be met in order for that sale price or the negotiated price to be market value. And interestingly enough, this definition is also the same definition from FIREA. So it's the same definition that that banks would use on their federally related transactions as well. The OCC uses it, the OTC. Most of the Federal Reserve uses this same definition. So as an appraiser, this is what this is the problem that we're solving for. So here's my tip for the day as I finish up here. Rather than, so if the opinion of value from the appraiser is different than what your negotiated purchase price would be, here's what I would ask the appraiser. Rather than just come up with a bunch of additional comparables that the appraiser may have already seen or may not have seen, what I would ask is this simple question, and I'll explain why. The question that I would ask is, what is it about my transaction that does not meet your definition of market value? If you feel like you have a transaction that all 5 of those components were met, you did your due diligence as the listing agent, you did a CMA, you have comparable properties. We have buyers and sellers that are equally motivated, that are typically motivated. Both of them, both the buyers, both parties have been well informed and well advised. You've had multiple offers that have been made for the property. There's been plenty of exposure to the market. The loan is in terms of cash, US dollars. There's not excessive or special creative financing in play. And then what is it, Mr. Appraiser, about my transaction that doesn't meet your definition of market value? I would want the appraiser to answer that question. There were a couple of other things related to my presentation that I saw in the chat, and hopefully we'll get to all of those questions or a fair number of them before the end of the day today. But one of the things that an appraiser should be doing is they should be analyzing the market. They should be looking and asking your help to understand how many offers you had. What were those offers? What were the motivations behind the buyers and the sellers? I saw one question that said, how can you help me as an appraiser? And that would be to just give me a synopsis of what happened with the property while you were showing it. How many showings did you have? How many offers did you have? Give me a summary of those. Those can certainly help. And I apologize to the panel. There's one other question that I want to hit really quick before I turn it over next to Craig. And that was, there is a trend, and we're starting to see that. And I think there were several questions about changing the list price once the property goes under contract or right before it goes under contract to match the contract price. As an appraiser, we do look at the listing history, and we have to analyze not only the transfer, but the listing history for the last 3 years on the subject property. It actually hurts the appraisal process and my analysis if you're changing the purchase price or the list price to meet the contract price. And the reason is, one of the things that we analyze is the list to sale price ratio. If everyone were changing the list price to contract price prior to closing, I'm going to show a 100% list to sale price ratio, which means that the market is really not appreciating. The 1 or 2% above list price actually helps me when I'm analyzing to see which direction the market is going. And so it's better to just list it for what you feel is a fair price. Do your CMA, list it, and then let the appraisal, let the whole process work through. and disclose the sale price at the end once it's closed. That helps the appraiser much more than changing the list price during the listing or during the process. Thank you very much, and I hope that we get to many questions. You'll have my contact information if you want to contact me separately as well. So thank you very much. And I will turn the time over to Craig Morley.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm not going to do the fancy PowerPoint. I'm just going to take just a few minutes and talk a little bit about what makes a sale a comparable sale, and try to see if I can keep you awake in the process, because I'm confident that sitting through some of this stuff is just a little bit tedious. So let me start off. I have served as a hearing officer for the Washington County Board of Equalization probably 25 years. And over that period of time, people will come in, and it's kind of a refreshing change, because usually people are coming in and, when I get a call from somebody, it's because they think you're too low on the appraisal. Well, when you're the hearing officer, people are coming in and saying, this is way too high. And there have been a number of situations where we've had people come in, and I remember one case in particular. They had engaged a real estate agent to help them with their tax appeal. And in that tax appeal, they had collected 100 sales that had taken place. And they took the average price per square foot of those 100 sales and then came in and said, look, this price per square foot is lower than what you have the property assessed for. And there was an expectation that would be reduced. Well, I think every single one of you that are agents and brokers that are dealing with appraisals are running into appraisal issues from time to time. There is appropriate process for appealing the appraisal. I think Jeff may talk a little bit about some of that, but one or two items that you ought to think about in that appeal process is, number one, you probably shouldn't contact the appraiser directly. Most lenders require that through appraiser independence that there is some kind of a communication barrier that limits the communication with the appraiser as it deals with value. Now, the reality is you can talk to appraisers about factual information, providing comparable sales information, providing physical characteristics, all of those kinds of things. But usually the call comes, hey, I'm unhappy because I think you appraised this way too low, and here's why. Well, that's an appropriate concern, and sometimes that is in fact the case. But when that happens, you go contact your lender client and develop the appeal for that reconsideration of value through that process. And in every situation where there's an appeal that you want to put together and send back through have the appraiser consider, it needs to go through the lender. And if an appraisal management company is involved, they need to be involved in that process to meet the federal requirements in terms of not, ensuring that there's not undue influence taking place. So let's talk about just the basics of how the valuation works. The valuation is really based on the principle of substitution. And the principle of substitution is that I have a property that has certain physical characteristics. What's a competitive substitute property for that? We oftentimes look at cost as an alternative to, I can't find an existing home that meets my needs, so I will look at the prospect of building one. And for newer homes, cost is certainly a consideration. But in the end, when you're appealing the appraisal, when you're selecting properties to be considered as being comparable sales, they need to have some basic characteristics. First is it's got to have similar economic characteristics, meaning that it's in the same or a similar neighborhood. It wouldn't be appropriate to, if I have a property that's being appraised in a neighborhood where predominant values are maybe 500,000, and I'm going to neighborhoods where predominant values are $1 million, Well, the neighborhood characteristics are different enough that that's probably not a substitute property and isn't going to give a reliable indication of market value. Some of the other elements are the physical characteristics of the property. Is this property have the same utility, the same function, a similar enough floor plan in terms of age, size, and design that a buyer looking at these two would consider this to be a substitute property? Now, the classic example for appraisers, and I suspect there's not an appraiser alive who hasn't had a situation where they're appraising a 2,500 square foot home and someone brings to them for consideration a home that's 1,500 square feet, but it's got a higher price per square foot. They say, look, this property sold at $250 a square foot, and you need to consider that as a comparable sale. Well, the reality is that's not how the valuation process works. And the question that oftentimes we will encounter is, I've got a property that has different physical characteristics. So how much is that swimming pool worth per square foot? Or how much is that view worth per square foot? Well, when all we're looking at is the price per square foot, it can sometimes result in misleading conclusions. And so as you're in the process of selecting comps, if the only thing you're looking at is the price per square foot, you may be missing out on the most significant elements to where you either undervalue or overvalue the property. If I have a property on a really nice view lot and all of the properties I'm looking at as comparable sales are not on a really nice view lot, that price per square foot is not reflecting the influence of the view on the potential price of that property. And the same principle applies when you're sending in an appeal for an appraisal that you think has been misvalued. And so my recommendation would be for you is that if you have a property that you disagree with the value conclusions, let's try to find comparable data that has similar location and physical characteristics, including size and design, so that those things can be considered in trying to determine what is the most probable price, as Jared has just defined. I saw a comment asking about, would you value a split entry home the same as a Rambler? And the answer is, it depends on how the market is responding to these various design elements. If I'm looking at the market and I can determine that split entry homes are selling for more or less than a traditional Rambler styled home, that then becomes the answer to the question. Probably the most common issue that we will encounter is a home that has a basement. And they will say, well, I've got a home that has 5,000 square feet, but the appraisal only said it had 2,500 square feet. They didn't give any value for the basement. Well, that's not true, usually anyway. Usually the appraisal requirements as imposed by the lending community and the GSEs want below grade space broken out from the above grade space. And so oftentimes as you read the appraisal, you will look and see where there may be a basement space and it's broken out and valued separately. It's not that it doesn't receive this value. It's just that the market oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes does not pay the same price for below grade space as it does for above grade space. And you will find regional differences. You get into southern Utah, and there are not very many homes with basements that are fully below grade. Most of the time, if you've got a home with a basement in southern Utah, it's a walkout basement, and that space may contribute more to the overall value of a home than a home that is similar with everything below grade. And those characteristics can influence the price. And oftentimes we find deficiencies in appraisals because the appraiser has not accurately reflected the contributory value of these various attributes associated with the property. So I think as you consider dealing with some of these issues that occur, that you need to take into consideration that the appraiser is writing this appraisal for their client and their intended user, who is not the borrower, not the listing agent, it's not the selling agent, it's the lender. And they have assignment conditions that have to be met in order for that to work. And so just one or two things to keep in mind is that when you have an appraisal contingency on a purchase agreement that is tied to the outcome of an appraisal, your borrower is not an intended user for that appraisal. They're not, the report is not written for the borrower, it's written for the lender. It meets the lender's guidelines. And as as was pointed out, there are different lender requirements based on who will be underwriting or insuring the loan. FHA's requirements are different than the VA's. The VA's are different than the conventional markets with the GSEs. And so oftentimes those things need to be considered by the appraiser in performing the appraisal. And it may not always be apparent to the agent and the borrower as to what some of those requirements are. It's a good idea to be aware of what those are, and perhaps so that you can better help represent your client's interests as you're dealing with those things. But in reality, there is no reason why, if you've got those kinds of contingencies in your purchase agreement, even if it's a cash agreement, that you can engage an appraiser to perform the appraisal to meet the condition of that purchase agreement. The only problem is, and this is why oftentimes the appraisal that's being done by the bank is used, is that a lender is prohibited by law from using an appraisal that was originated by either you as the agent broker or by your client. It has to be originated by the lender that's making the loan. Now, if any of you are interested in getting a little deeper dive on some of this, I've got a little video that we've made on how to appeal an appraisal. And I can give you that video link to Deanna, and she can send that out to anybody who is interested, so that it may give you a better idea on some of the areas where there may be, that there are areas in the appraisal that oftentimes are problematic. And as it was pointed out at the beginning, you know, we're dealing with some of these collateral underwriter, the UAD coding, and oftentimes some of the areas where there may be a problem are tied up in that rating of the property. And if the video kind of goes into a little deeper detail on how that works. So I'm going to conclude my remarks to try to see if we can get back on schedule. I'm still a few minutes over my cutoff time, but try to get back on track so that we can let the other participants be able to share the content that they've provided with you. As always, feel free to reach out. If there's anything that we can do to help you with appraisal related issues, we're happy to try to do that. Thanks very much.
Very good. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations, you've made it through most of this. I must be kind of tough sitting here listening to appraisers speak all morning, so your CE is well earned. However, I will say that I do appreciate and value what's been shared by the others. We are a little bit behind, so I did anticipate that some of these topics that we've discussed will have some real crossovers, so I won't go deeply into some of the presentation material that I've got, but do have a few kind of high-level thoughts that I hope will be valuable as you're interacting with appraisals and appraisers in facilitating these transactions. I've structured this in a way, and I'll share my screen with you, that I hope will be helpful in just thinking through the touch points at which you are interacting with an appraiser in the process. Give me just 1 second while this comes up. Okay, there we go. So as we go through the transaction, typically, at least on a purchase, and you'll be interacting initially with the appraiser before the appraisal is even completed or submitted. Craig, who is my father, just talked through some of the appeal processes and some approaches there, and certainly the video that he's got is helpful. I'll give you a few high-level takeaways there. Then I'll give you just a few thoughts on the state process for receiving and filtering and approaching complaints that are filed when that process becomes necessary. That's usually, obviously post the inspection being or the appraisal being done and submitted if there hasn't been able to be some kind of resolution to the process. Where we've touched on a number of these things, I won't dive real deeply, but in terms of communicating with the appraiser, and this is, during the process of the appraisal being completed, there are things that I think are valuable to do and that proactively can be done, providing data, especially something that may not be just readily available. Most appraisers are members of the local MLS board and should have access to the MLS. If you have information that's either not on the MLS or that, should be considered, but may not be readily available, providing that's always a good idea. And not only just the data, but the context of the data or the why behind it. If something's happening in the market, if you've got a listing and you're worried about a house that's sold down the street, that's sold cheap for whatever reason, the more details that you can give to an appraiser, the better off they are, because as Brandon showed you, appraisers are subject to a fair amount of kind of review and scrutiny just by their clients in the first place. The lender has to believe and sign off on the appraisal before they can fund a loan, to move forward with the transaction. And oftentimes the appraiser will have somebody reviewing and, in a sense, looking over their shoulder saying, well, why didn't you use this comp down the street? And if the appraiser knows, whether through their own investigation or because you bring to light some issue with a property that's sold that might, potentially be used as a comparable, the appraiser can then explain in their report, I didn't use this sale, or if I did, I'm not giving it very much weight or consideration, and here's why. An underwriter can understand that and everybody moves on. If an appraiser happens to use something that's not relevant, it can oftentimes throw the numbers off, and then you're dissatisfied about the results, and it could have been addressed or kind of dealt with preemptively, and avoid the reconsiderations and the disputes and those types of things that tend to come up after the fact. One other just quick thing to point out is that as you are interacting with buyers and sellers, appraisers, and I appreciated Jared's sharing of the definition of market value. We're trying to predict kind of what somebody or a typical buyer would pay for something. Any insights that you have on trends or what people are valuing as you're talking with buyers and sellers is certainly helpful information to relay to an appraiser. I was talking to an agent just the other day who said, I'm seeing pools worth a lot more today than they used to be, and because of how far backed up people are to be able to contract out and put in a pool. So if you want one, you might be waiting for a year, or I don't remember how long it was, but a lot longer than you used to be. There are trends or changes in the market that as you observe and see, relaying that to the appraiser, look, I know historically maybe you haven't adjusted as much for this feature. Here's what we're seeing. Here's how much it's going to cost my buyers to go in and make this change or add this feature, and here's how far out it is. Helps give some context to the appraisers. Some of the don'ts here are quite obvious, but beyond just the human nature aspect of people tending to not want to kind of do what they're forced or shoved into doing, there is another aspect that appraisers are by definition supposed to remain independent and unbiased in the process. And so even if an appraiser recognizes, oh, maybe this agent has something maybe I should consider, there's a world of difference in, here's some additional information that might help you in your analysis. And if you don't use this information I'm giving you, I'm going to, take some punitive action. The one is much more likely to have a good reception on the part of the appraiser than the other. And if an appraiser feels threatened to some extent, then they perhaps could get to a point where they shouldn't even do the appraisal, or certainly are going to be unlikely to want to be perceived as being influenced in a negative or inappropriate way. So a few thoughts on the communication with the appraiser. Again, where we had discussed the disputes, I won't go real deeply, but just a couple of thoughts beyond what's been shared. again, kind of going back to what Brandon had shared, when there are cells, that are showing up in the map, underwriters are wanting us as appraisers to provide data, and the most powerful kind of potent data is that which is closed. I've seen some questions about listings as well, and certainly those things need to be accounted for in competing inventory. But keep in mind that just because there's a limited inventory doesn't automatically place kind of an endless ceiling on what a value can or should be. If I've got a home that's listed for $500,000 that's selling at 10% above the list price because of a lack of inventory, the appraiser still has to point to sales and listings in the market to support whatever that number is, whether it's 500 or less or more, or the 550. Just because there's not much to buy doesn't mean that that $500,000 house could just as easily be worth $5 million, obviously. And so, we have to try to make sense out of the data, and in a way that a third party can understand our logic on. So I'd mentioned that if you've got data, especially builder cells or something that maybe is not showing up on the MLS, that's helpful information to submit in a review or a dispute kind of environment. But keep in mind that the appraiser needs to have the ability to verify or have some confirmation of what that information is. Just because a builder said, yeah, I sold lot 10 for $1 million, a HUD statement or some way to verify that information is usually what the appraiser is going to need to be able to include it in the analysis. If you're seeing, once the appraisal's been submitted and you're looking to appeal it, if you're seeing information in there that maybe the appraiser would benefit from additional context, kind of like what we discussed just a minute ago, that's helpful to point out. If an appraiser has used a comparable cell that really isn't a substitute for what's being appraised, and you can provide an alternative that is maybe better, even if it has to be further away or something. Pointing out the why behind the data is certainly helpful. The example of the split level and the single levels, if an appraiser had used a split level comparable cell and you were wanting to dispute that appraisal, providing some alternatives that are single levels with the explanation that, my buyer didn't even look at split levels and here's why it doesn't meet the same function and utility in the market, and those kinds of things help give better justification as to why there should be some kind of a change made after the fact. Craig addressed pretty well the nature of the appraiser's relationship with the client. We have to maintain the confidentiality requirements that we have with the lender that engages us. And this is in a lending environment. Obviously, if you engage an appraiser, for a cash transaction, but you've got an appraisal contingency or something, then certainly those communication lines are more open if you are the actual client as opposed to a party to the transaction, but the appraisal's been engaged by the lender. We're short on time, so I'll just give you a quick summary, let you kind of view here. I did reach out to the state. I chair the board for the appraiser licensing and certification board for Utah. And, we see a fair amount of complaints that will come through. There is an initial screening that goes on when a complaint is filed to the board initially. And if the basis of the complaint is simply, I don't like the value, the board or the division that is screening that will typically, say, look, there's not enough information to be actionable there. If the complaint is, the conclusion is wrong, don't like the value, and here's why, here's some data that support why it should have been done or addressed differently, then they will escalate that. The division actually contracts with certain appraisers to review, do a kind of a quality review of the appraisal and the work file that was, that's under investigation. It'll work its way through the process and make a recommendation. Typically, the state will then reach out and try to find some sort of resolution with the appraiser. They may come up with a stipulation that says, yeah, I probably should have done something differently. We both agree that here's the remediation going forward. If they don't come to an agreement, then it'll go to a hearing before the board where, we'll ask the questions and dive fairly deeply into the circumstances around the appraisal and then take corrective action. Whether it's a combination of a fine or additional education in extreme cases can result in the removal of an appraiser's license or certification. So I know it's a little bit fast, but I want to be able to hear from Ashley as well. So appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll be able to get to some questions that we have at the end of this as well. But with that, we'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
Okay, can you all hear me? Okay, I heard yes from my broker, so. First of all, I would like to thank all of the agents and the appraisers who knew I was going to be on this panel today and kind of flooded my inbox with memes and jokes about appraisals and the current market. And while those who have worked with me or have taken one of my classes know, I do like to approach some things with humor. I do not, however, feel that some of the memes that were sent to me would be seen as appropriate by the UAR. So I'm going to take this presentation in a different direction. But before I do, I would like to say that I understand it is comforting to want to place blame on someone for the craziness of the current market that we're all experiencing. And that being said, I do want to clear the record that Carol Baskin is not to blame for every low appraisal right now. Although I did receive that meme about a dozen times over the last 3 days. So if you don't get that joke, it's okay. Your life is probably better off because of it. Today, I was asked to cover good practices, how to apply some of the subjects that have been brought up by other panel members, and how to use that in the business of being a real estate agent or broker. First of all, appraisers and agents are not enemies. We are not at odds with each other. We both play vital roles in a balanced market. The agent's job is to advocate for their clients. It is to put their best interests first, above all others. The appraiser is to act as an independent party to the transaction. So keep that in mind, but do realize that we are not at odds and we don't need to be at odds with each other in this market. The first question I was asked to address specifically was how to manage client expectations when you suspect an appraisal will come back lower than the contract price. This is something that both listing agents and buyer's agents should be paying attention to, and this is just a business practice. If you have completed a good CMA that you feel is correct, and you get a contract price, or your buyers want to offer more than your CMA supports, I think it's very important to have that conversation with your agent or with your clients and let them know, look, you can offer as a buyer, you can offer anything you want. And as a seller, you can accept any offer that you want. But here is the data is leading my CMA to show a certain value range. And if we are outside of that value range, it's very likely that the appraisal will come back lower. And I think it's important to have that conversation with your clients before the appraisal is completed so that if it does come back lower, they are prepared for what that will mean, whether or not that means they're going to have to pay cash over the appraisal, if that is something that was written into the contract, if sellers run the risk of having to accept a final sales price that is lower than the contract price, that might be something that needs to come up. So I think have those conversations and educate your clients on what the risks of accepting or writing an offer that is above your CMA. One of the other questions that has kind of been answered, so I'll just briefly touch on it. What can agents do to help ensure the appraisal is accurate? Appraisers analyze data. That's what we go off of. We don't just pull numbers out of the air. I do recommend that listing agents compile all of the data they can that supports that contract price or that list price. As a handful of the panelists have said, put together a spreadsheet. Show me how many showings you had. Show me the offers. I may not want to see every individual offer, although sometimes I do like to see those contracts. But at a minimum, I do like to see a spreadsheet that says, hey, look, we got 10 or 20 or 30 offers, and here's where all of the offer prices were. A lot of times I can find patterns in that data that is provided by listing agents that helps me support the appraisal a little bit better than just seeing the the one contract that it has been accepted. When an appraiser calls you as an agent on a transaction that has closed and they are looking to confirm information, talk to the appraiser. They're not asking you to do their job. They're looking for information on the market as well as the transaction. The more information that we have from agents, the more accurate our appraisals are going to be. And that includes on pending sales. So listing agents, if we call you and say, hey, I see your property is under contract. Can you tell me what the contract price is? Is there information? As long as your client has given you permission to share that information, there is nothing stopping you from sharing that information with an appraiser if they call. If an appraiser calls and says, what's the contract price on your property? If your seller authorizes it, give them that information. The appraiser is not going to turn around and call every agent in town and disclose confidential information. Information that we are told is confidential will be kept confidential, but if we can use that to help support an appraisal price on another property, it will often have a direct impact on the appraisal that you are trying to get on your pending sale as well. So we do need to share information when appropriate. Along with that, I get the question often is, why can values be different for an appraisal done for a refinance versus a purchase appraisal? Or why do we order one appraisal and then a second one comes in higher? For the most part, in my own personal experience, I have found that that has a tendency to be based on the level of data and information that is provided to the appraiser prior to the appraisal. So a refinance, it's much more uncommon that I show up to a refinance appraisal and I am greeted with a packet of information on the market, comps, updates to the home. It happens, but it's not as typical. When I go to a purchase, I expect a listing agent to provide information that they have that would support a contract price or a listing price, especially if it's on the higher end. So frankly, we just typically don't receive the same level of data from a homeowner as we do an agent, which is one of the reasons, sellers should use an agent. Same with a first and second. I can't even tell you how many times I've called to make an appraisal appointment for a purchase and the listing agent doesn't even want to talk to me. They'll respond, just use showing time, call my assistant. This is an opportunity that you've just wasted. As an appraiser, I've called you to schedule something. I'm on the phone with you right now. Give me the information. Ask me for my email address so you can email me all of the data that you have prepared for me. Don't wait until appraisal comes back lower than you expected it to suddenly find data. Give us the data before we go out the first time. That's one of the reasons why I do see second appraisals. Oh, the first appraisal came back low. Well, what information did you give the appraiser on that first appraisal? Well, nothing. But on the second time, we made sure to meet the appraiser with all of this information that we had gathered. Do that the first round. Don't wait until an appraisal comes back low to find some information that supports your price. The value of the data, the data that we analyze, as I said, has a direct correlation with the accuracy of our appraisal reports. I cannot emphasize enough the importance that correct information is placed on listings. We analyze listing information. If agents are putting information on the listing that is inaccurate, it will impact appraisals, and it will impact appraisals across the market. We really, really need to get listing agents educated on correct info to list on our listings. One of the biggest is square footage. If you walk into a listing and you have the county records and you can tell that the county records are probably incorrect, that does not mean that you can just list the county records on your listing and think that that's not going to cause any problems. I recently talked to a buyer who purchased a home in Utah County, and they bought the home sight unseen. They were from out of state, and they used the information on the MLS listing to determine what they wanted to offer for the home. They close, they get to the property. They were going to use it as an investment property, a rental, and they realized that what were listed as bedrooms in the basement did not actually have any windows. They called me and said, how could a listing agent put that these are bedrooms when there's no windows? They are now looking at suing the listing agent for putting that information. And, you know, the question of, is it the buyer's responsibility for not verifying that, or was it the listing agent's responsibility for not listing correctly? That could be debatable. But at the end of the day, as an agent, my advice to other agents is that you want to comport your business in a way that will allow you to stay an agent for years to come, both in your licensing requirements and liability, as well as, you know, how you work with your agents or work with your clients. Nothing kills referrals and repeat business like getting your clients into a lawsuit. It doesn't matter if they win or lose the lawsuit. Nobody wants to be in a lawsuit to begin with. We are seeing a huge increase in liability for both our agents, our brokerages, and our clients. Some of my best clients are attorneys, local attorneys, and I've worked for them for years. So these attorneys are telling me, and I'm seeing it across the nation as well as in Utah, about some pending lawsuits that are going to be faced by agents and brokerages. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of things to keep in mind. A listing agent lists a home with some inaccurate information about the square footage or the bedroom count. The appraisal is completed on the property and it comes back low due to the fact that the information provided on the listing is not the reality of the situation. Say the square footage is 800 square feet off. The appraisal reflects that and comes back low. The listing agent took non-refundable earnest money, refuses, or the seller refuses to relinquish that non-refundable earnest money, nor will they bring the contract price down. And they cancel that contract and accept a second offer. The first offer is now suing the seller and the listing agent. Again, I don't know how it'll turn out, but I wouldn't want to be involved in it. Second, this is a huge one right now, and I don't understand why our agents do not know that this is not a practice they should be doing. We are seeing an increase in listing agents measuring their own properties. The square footage is not supposed to come from an agent's personal measurements. We have seen cases where listing agents have measured the property. Again, they made a mistake. The appraisal came back low and the seller refuses to alter the terms of the contract. Buyers back out. They are now suing the listing agent for inaccurate information put on the MLS. The third type of lawsuit we are seeing an increase of is regarding waiving the appraisal. Buyers are waiving their appraisal. They close on the home. A month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the road, buyer's remorse kicks in. They are talking to the neighbors and the neighbors are all like, we can't believe you paid that much for a home. I can't believe an appraisal came in. And they're like, well, we waived the appraisal upon the advice of our agent. We are now seeing buyers going back and suing buyers' agents for giving them advice on waiving the appraisal. And this is a huge one right now. It does not take me long to jump onto Facebook or to any other social media platform and see agents giving out a lot of bad and inaccurate information and advice regarding appraisals. Agents and brokers, please pay attention to what your agents are saying online and what they're saying to their clients. There is not a difference when it comes to a mortgage transaction. There is not a difference between appraised value and market value. And if you are telling your clients, don't worry about an appraisal, it's just appraised value, market value is different, you're telling them something that is factually inaccurate. This is not a freshman philosophy class where we can sit back and debate what market value really is and our interpretation of market value. When we are talking about real estate transactions, as Jared already mentioned, that definition has been supplied to us already. We don't need to reinvent the definition. We don't need to tell our clients what we think market value is. Use the definition that is going to apply to their transaction, or you're opening yourself up to some real liability. Appraisals are not the same as a CMA. Don't tell your clients that that's the case. Don't tell them, well, here's my CMA, you don't need an appraisal. You're opening yourself up to some real big liability. Also, I would have your agents stop telling their clients that appraisals are pointless in this market. Again, you are giving advice that is opening yourself up to some real big liability. Along that point, I actually, instead of a tip or a tidbit, I have a request. And this request is to the UAR as well as to all of the brokers watching right now. In 2019, we attended many of us on this panel attended our national conference for appraisals in Nashville. And at that meeting, it was talked about with some representatives from NAR about their fear that appraisal waivers will become more commonplace and the impact that will have on a balanced market if we take appraisals out of the equation. NAR has 2 documents, and I've sent them to the UAR so they can share those with anybody who wants. But if you look them up, they have 2 documents that you could use. The first is called Being an Informed Home Buyer. Your home and its investment know its value. This is an educational document that you can provide your buyers that shows them a very brief, sorry, I set a timer, a very brief summary of what an appraisal is and the various types of appraisals. The other one is just one of the FAQs for agents called Residential Appraisal Process. This is a very simplistic description of the appraisal process and some questions. If you have questions about the appraisal process, what is an appraisal, these are 2 good documents to start with. But my final request to the UAR is to consider the Forms Committee to consider creating an appraisal disclosure that we would have our buyers, as agents, we would have our buyers sign. So if buyers come back and say, we want to waive the appraisal, or we want to pay cash over the appraisal, that we have this form that all buyers would have to read and sign that says they understand what an appraisal is, what market value is, what the appraiser is looking for, and if they waive their right to have an appraisal, what that means. And if all buyers were presented with this disclosure, very similar to the buyer's due diligence disclosure, that they then had to sign, I think that that would decrease a lot of liability that we are seeing right now with agents giving inaccurate or poor advice on the appraisal process of the transaction. I would love to see some kind of a disclosure adopted by UAR on appraisals. And I would love to see some appraisers invited to be on the Forms Committee when you are creating forms that deal with appraisals. That pretty much summarizes what I had been asked to talk about today. So I will turn over the time back over to Deanna.
All right, thank you so much for your presentations. Now we'll get into the questions with the appraisers. Now, one of the questions, I'm seeing a lot of themes in the chat, and I'm going to go on this one because we just talked about it, Ashley, in your presentation about communication with the appraiser. And we're getting a lot of comments in the chat about how some agents are saying that they're providing that information, but the appraiser's not accepting it. We're also having questions from appraisers about, well, how do we provide that information to the appraiser? So I would love for all of the appraisers to chime in on thoughts about communication with the appraiser and what can we do when the appraiser doesn't want to accept the information.
Well, Deanna, maybe I can jump in really quick. one of the things that we've developed is a little video that we try to send to the borrower before we go to their home that allows them to kind of manage their expectation. How long is it going to take to do the appraisal? What should I do to have my property ready for the appraisal? And what are some of the things that I can do to make sure that the appraisal goes smoothly? Part of that includes providing information. In fact, we've got a fillable PDF that we like to use that allows the property owner to talk about remodeling that they've done to the bathrooms and bedrooms and updating to mechanical systems and solar systems. Solar was a question that had shown up there, which, by the way, if it's a lease system, it's considered personal property and it probably won't be included as part of the valuation. But I think that using that information and providing it, whether it's in person or email or however that's done, is more likely to result in a better, more complete result on the appraisal than just about anything else. And if there's appraisers who are not willing to accept that, maybe we've got some professional ethics issues going on, because the appraiser is obligated to consider all the relevant data. And if they're not doing that, and if the appraisal ends up not including some of that information, there may be the basis for some kind of a complaint.
I would agree with Craig. I think that it's the appraiser's obligation to take that information. One of the things you do need to be careful of is how you communicate it. You don't want to do it in a way that's pressuring the appraiser, but the appraisers should be in the mode of gathering information, especially when they're at the inspection, walking through the property, wanting to get as much information. I personally would love to see the process you went through in pricing, your CMA, how you did that. Understand that the appraiser would be biased, which we can't be if we do our searches by price. So most appraisers, all appraisers should not be putting in a price as a limiting factor within their searches. If I'm appraising a 1950s Rambler or bungalow that's 900 square foot up, 900 down, I'm going to put in features maybe from 1935 to 1960, from 800 square feet to 1,000 or 1,100 square foot. I'm going to be looking at features that are similar, trying to find similar, but not by price. And that would be one probably tip, but it would be very troubling to me, like what Craig mentioned, if an appraiser is not willing to at least consider or see the process in which you went to price the home.
Thank you for that. Jared, I want to go back to something that you discussed in your presentation, because I think I've gotten lots of questions both in the chat, and I got a few questions prior to this panel about changing the list price once the property goes under contract. Both for the agent wanting the appraiser to see that it's gone under contract, and secondly, too, if they have buyers who are accepting backup offers, they kind of want them to know what price the property is at right now. So I want to just kind of delve into this in a little bit more, get opinions on what we do about when the agent wants to, and best practice when the agent wants to change the price when it's gone under contract.
Yeah, this is a hot topic. I have a lot of brokers and agents that ask me about it all the time. As an appraiser, first of all, if I'm making a market or time adjustment, I'm going to do it from the contract date, not from the close date. So we'll go back and say in the MLS, it will tell me when the status changed to under contract. If that was a month ago, then I'm going to start calculating my market adjustment from that contract date, not from close date. And one of the indications, or one of the indicators that we analyze, is the list to sale price ratio. There's actually a Fannie Mae form in which we have to identify what the list to sale price ratio is in that market. And if the list to sale price ratio is showing 100%, and it's not moving upward, then it would be an indication that the market is more stable, that there's not an undersupply, that the market is very, it's okay. There's not a frenzy in the market, or there's not a rapid increase or change in the market. It would just be one of those indications. But most appraisers would be analyzing that change between list price and list and final sale price. And so by changing that, we're kind of skewing that data that we rely on. You know, it's not the only data point, but it is a significant data point.
I'd like to jump in on there too. I get this question all the time, and agents are usually saying, doesn't it help appraisers hit that value that we need? That short answer to that is no, because appraisers, like Jared has mentioned, analyze the listing history. You're not fooling an appraiser by changing the price. We don't suddenly just think, well, that must have been what the original list price was, and ignore all of the data that's right in front of us. I do have agents that will argue, I want to change it for the reasons that were brought up by Deanna, in terms of, I want backup offers to know that this is our contract price. Maybe it helps other appraisers who are using our pending sell as additional support in the appraisal. If you want to disclose your contract price to other agents or buyers or appraisers, you can. You don't have to change the list price to disclose that information, as long as your client has given permission for that information to be disclosed. So if you want everybody who sees your listing to know what your contract price is, put it in the agent remarks prior to marking the property as under contract. You don't need to change the list price. It can cause problems when you change the list price. But if you have reasons that you think that everybody needs to know what your contract price is, you can do it in a way without manipulating the contract price.
Thank you for that. So another of the hot topics that I got a question before the panel, and I've seen some remarks in the Q&A, is about this competitive market. And what are you all doing as appraisers to account for the fact that it's a rising market? One question says, is there a market percentage added to values just because that's what happens just to get an offer accepted? So how are you all dealing with the increase in values with this rapidly rising market?
Well, it's definitely a challenging market to be appraising in, and trying to keep up, you know, in a sense, with those escalating values is challenging. There are a few things that we do. One is, if we're looking at a home, even if it's sold not very long ago, it's not difficult to trend what the rate of increase is. And then, yes, we can certainly adjust for just the market escalations from the time that a comp sold 2 or 3 months ago, or further back if it's being used, to bring it up to today's date. I personally think that it is important to consider, you know, your competing listings and active listings as well, because usually in an escalating market, those are priced higher than what the historically closed sales are. And that helps our third-party reviewers understand that, look, 3 months ago it sold for this. Today it's now offered at a higher price. And so because the appraisers adjusted the older sell to bring it up to the current market pricing, it helps them understand why we've done that. And that's probably the most common way to address it.
And then one last question that we saw a lot of in the chat, and that's about the timing of it. I know you all are very, very busy. What can agents expect for the turnaround on that appraisal to be in this market?
My experience is that most appraisers are out more than 2 weeks right now on residential properties. It's a communication issue. I know I get a lot of orders wanting me to bid my best turn time. When can I have it back by? And appraisers are trying very hard to meet those deadlines. Understand, though, that if there's an appraisal management company in the mix, communication can be delayed. So I might say, here's when I can do it by, and then that gets to the appraisal management company. They respond to the lender the next morning, then the lender, so there is an inherent delay in the process. But I would check with whoever's doing the loan first to make sure that they can meet the deadline that you've put in your purchase contract. I look at both. I think probably most appraisers do. If they have a due date from the client, but then they notice that the dates within the contract are sooner, then I'll try to meet those, but it's very difficult at this time. And it's not unique to Utah. This is across the country.
And you may want to keep in mind as well that stuff in your urban areas are going to be turned around a little faster than stuff, properties out in remote rural areas. If you've got something that's outside of your metro areas, it's harder to find appraisers, and it usually takes a little longer to get those done. So if you've got properties that are not, or that are either a one-off, kind of an unusual property, or property that is outside of a major metro, you might expect that to take a little longer to get the appraisal turned around.
All right. Well, thank you. It looks like we are nearing on time here. So I want to thank all of you for all of your insights and information. I'm going to gather the information that you've used in presentations and resources and links. I'm also going to gather this recording, and I will send that out to all of you as soon as we have that compiled as attendees, so you have those resources. So thank you again. I'm going to turn the time back over to Carol Norton to wrap us up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. And thank you for being here today, everyone. Again, I want to offer a huge thank you, especially to each of our presenters for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here and educate us about this important topic. Thank you so much for all that you do. A recording of this presentation, again, will be available on our website in a day or two. Thanks again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at future Salt Lake Board and UAR events. Have a great day.